Welcome to the Artists and Emotions podcast. I'm your host, Cody Alexander Curtis, and today to say I have a special guest would be a bit of an understatement because our guest today I consider at this point to be a good friend of mine, but it is also someone who I have had the chance to not only work with on one of my projects, we'll get into that, but someone who I have been following and admiring just the amount of work that they have done over the past couple of years, if not longer. I'll definitely get into that because I definitely knew about you before Broken Petals came around. But this is Liz Bishop. She is an actor who has to say she's had a bit of success would be a bit of an understatement because for those of you who may or may not know, and I'm actually glad that everything that happened last year is over so we can talk about this, but Liz Bishop, for any of you who might recognize her, appeared in a little film called The Holdovers during this past year. It was a small one line thing, but hey, it's still a big thing. Directed by Alexander Payne, and it was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars this past year. So we're going to get into all of that and more because Liz and I have not seen each other in a long time, even though it just feels like yesterday. Liz, how are you doing today?
Cody, thank you so much for that most generous introduction. I am not worthy. I'm a little embarrassed here. Thank you. I just love to see you smile, man. I am just so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on here. I am fabulous because I have had such a wonderful experience coming on camera these past few years. It's been terrific. And thanks in part to you. And we will get into that in a bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, we definitely will. And the one thing for any of you who are listening, uh who may not know, Liz's resume based on just the past few years, it is from theater to commercial and print work to television and film work. It's very, very extensive. If you want a hint of that, literally just go over to her IMDb page. It's there. I gotta give you props, Liz, and it's something that with being on a film set, a lot of things in terms of praise and compliments and everything else, they don't generally have the time to be said because anybody who's been on a film set knows it's a lot. It's a very tightly wound ship, and a lot of things need to get done. But the thing I need to tell you is that I admire the fact that your authenticity. That is the biggest way I can say it. Authentically as an actor, as a person, and however you appear on screen and just with the people around you, you're one of the most generous and giving people I have ever met. And I haven't had the chance to say it, and now I do. Because anybody who has heard me say it before, I started the podcast. Yes, I want to talk with cool people, but it's also a bit selfish because I don't get to see people as often as I would like. So that's one of the reasons for this. But from how hard you work to how dedicated you are to your craft, and not just that, but how dedicated you are to every aspect of your life, I just so thoroughly appreciate it. And for me, someone who's only 27, it's something that I seriously look up to.
So, Cody, God, thank you. Where do I begin with my thanks? Because I I checks in the mail, buddy. Man. Um, it's not that impressive when I boil it down to this. I am making up for lost time, and the universe knows it. The universe knows it, period. I was denied to major in theater arts for college, and my parents, you know, were way older, like 2 generations older, um, had their reasons for not so gently painting me into a corner to not major in theater. So I put my dreams on hold for literally 40 years. And I know. So I when I say I'm making up for lost time, I'm making up for 40 years of lost time. That having been said, I got theater when and where I could in the streets. you know, you wanna read a play? Um, and, wherever I could, and thankfully, um, I I've been married for 34 years. I've known my husband for 38 years, and, so 40 is a generality. When I graduated from college after, doing what my parents wanted me to do, I moved to Europe and I met my future husband. And so that was 38 years ago. And he's very supportive in what I do. And we carry that over into allowing our kids to be them, who they want to be, how to express themselves. So it's just wonderful to have generous people in your life that support you, even though they may not understand it at all. So when I was finally able to come out of, like, empty nest, the nest emptied, I said, "It's kind of my time to do what I've always wanted to do." And, did community theater, tried to drag my kids onto stage, so that I'd have a really good excuse to be able to leave for weeks on end, and had a blast. But this last section of my act 3 journey here, my 3rd act of life, has been this on-camera work, which has just been so rewarding and fantastic. I'm jumping around. Uh, I when I when I lived in Europe, I did college radio, and I moved to Europe, and I was at a radio station called Radio Luxembourg. And Radio Luxembourg was a fabulous opportunity to do, uh, commercials and, comedy bits and little drop-in ads and things, just, smatterings of stuff, which was wonderful. But I parlayed that into a voiceover career, and that's what I did while we were raising our children. And it was time to come out of the padded cell and, be seen in the world, and here I am.
And here you are, and we are glad that you are here to stay. Now, okay, I gotta ask because I have a mother who has been very supportive, like two parents who have always been very supportive that I'm in the arts. Now that I have someone on this show who is a parent, who is also that encouraging, but didn't exactly have that when they were growing up. What do you think the big reasoning? Obviously, generalization here because everybody has their reasons. But what do you think one of the big reasons why parents aren't necessarily as supportive as they could be when it comes to their kids going into the arts?
That's an excellent question. I will tell you, in my case, it was because they literally said, "You have to be able to afford yourself when you get out. You have to have a career that can support you." And we pretty much know that this is a very rough, way to make a living, because we're independent workers basically going from job to job to job. And lightning doesn't strike that often to grant wishes for doors opening up to have big, big, big opportunities. It just is so tough, especially if you live in a smaller town or you don't have connections, you don't know where to start. So, number one, I think it's parents really want their children to be, um, have a good standard of living. And number two, I suspect many people also feel that it's frivolous because if they don't have the burning passion for the craft or to create, and the free spirit to express themselves in that way, I think there's a bit of they don't understand it and or jealousy because perhaps they wanted to do something fun and free, and their parents made them become accountants. Yeah, I can think of nothing more torturous than to work with numbers.
Yeah, that makes two of us there, Liz. And it's so interesting that you bring that up. And I hope that the past few years have done what they can to
Mm,
change that perspective, especially with COVID. Like we know that COVID was it was a difficult time for everybody, but there was one thing collectively that brought everybody together during that time period. And it was stories, it was shows, it was documentaries, it was probably a lot of older stuff. Definitely in my case it was. But it started a conversation between people even across the internet when we couldn't see each other in person, at just how important stories still are to us, to everybody.
absolutely.
So I mean, in my mind, at least, I just hope that the conversation, and it feels like it is starting to shift at least somewhat. And definitely with storytellers like you, it's only going to get better and better.
I
That's all I.
I hope so for young people. I know that many people, myself included, basically started and then all the strikes happened.
Yeah.
The wheels were going off IATSE, what, 3 years ago already, 4 years ago already, and, now they're back at the negotiation table, and so it's cyclical, and it's been a really weird time all around for, the performing arts when people couldn't go back to the theater. They had to be masked or, sit every other seat. That was strange, but I think we've turned a corner in that regard, that people are more happy to come to live performances and participate in theatrical, performances, and go to the theater and watch film, and be on sets. I think that's changed greatly, and I do think that the stories will have to be told. We're just now painted into a tighter box with how to tell them, because the shape of the industry has changed dramatically since I was a child. Just look at the number of, the Deadline article that I think a lot of people in the arts have referenced, the number of pilots for, quote, pilot season this year were numbered 3, apparently, whereas the year before was 100. So we're in a stalled pattern here for being able to create at least small form stories, not big productions.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to keep this conversation going because as someone who was basically just working in the independent circuit and still is, I want to get your perspective on all everything that happened last year because I know how it affected me and the people who are in my circle, but what was your life, or I guess how what was it like for you as soon as the strikes happened?
Well, coincidentally, I had just put in an audition for a larger film that was coming to the Boston area, um, that has not come back yet to the Boston area. So who knows what happened to that project? Um, and I got COVID. So I started off the strike with my first ever round of COVID. I staved it off a long, long time. And then it was a domino effect because then I got my son infected, and my husband. So literally, it was like a 6, 7 week stretch of illness in the house. So I wasn't paying attention to the fact that there were no big productions in the summer in Boston. And I started in 2019 when there were so many productions in Boston. You could just sign up and they would want you for background artistry all day long, every day on multiple projects. It was a heyday here for Boston, if you ask me. And then obviously that changed in 2020, and it's been trying to eke up ever since. And then the doors just shut last year.
Yeah, and that's I mean, it's crazy, and especially since most people know about the writer and actor strikes that happened last year because it was I don't think anybody recognized that it was going to go as nation and internationally wide as it did in terms of people knowing what was going on. But the strikes happened, that slowed everything down, and then things are still slow because, like you said, IATSE's getting ready to go into their negotiations, and if they go to strike, it's going to be another year with things trying to get fixed out, and they're just reintegrating the new contracts for everything. And from my perspective, even if Yahtzee wasn't potentially going on strike, productions would still be stalled because anybody who has worked with contracts before, even on the small level, they take a while to go through, whether it's people reading the paperwork or signing the paperwork or having their attorneys look over paperwork and everything else. It's a process. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next few years unfold. So thank you for sharing that. And now I sort of want to get into more of a lighter note because for anybody who's listening who may be wondering how Liz and I actually know each other, so I want to preface this with saying that people like Mark J. Parker, which for any of you who have been listeners of this podcast know, I had him on the podcast earlier, and he's a good buddy of mine. I had been sort of through Mark and through a few other people who have worked with you, I had known about Liz in terms of the smaller indie circuit for a little bit. And then me and my creative partner, Zachary Tyler Wheaton, we decided because both of us were moving away from Maine at the beginning of 2023, we decided we wanted to make one last project to sort of showcase everything that we had learned while we'd been in a state that's sort of away from the industry. For those of you who don't know, if you're an actor in Maine, you sort of have to be everything else because there's no industry in the state. So we put together our plan, we sent out a casting call, and Liz got cast in the project because I, first of all, loved your audition as of note and just took everybody's word, which is about just how great you were, not only in terms of your professionalism, but also how great you were as a person. And I mean, the rest is history.
How is she?
As good as expected, given the circumstances.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Did you think about apologizing?
Yeah, like that's gonna help. I screwed up. You know what? Let me show you something.
Did you miss all of these?
Every single one. And I lied to her about it right afterwards. You know the funny part? I'm pretty sure she was catching on that I was doing it after a while, and she still was trying to get me to go anyways.
Why?
She's been there for me when nobody else has. She always has been. You know what happened yesterday? We got here, and the first thing I did, I went swimming, and I drank myself into a full blackout. And she still decided to take care of me. And I did it so I wouldn't have to face her, because I know that I remind her of our father in every single fucking way possible. I wish she would come back so I can look her in the eye and tell her what a fucking failure I am.
You know, I think I've heard just about enough of this.
You're fucking joking, right? Please tell me you're joking.
Failure is just a title you give yourself. Doesn't have to define you.
Well, it's over. Okay? And I don't expect to ever see her again.
After working together on that project, I've just been staying in touch with Liz and been so happy with all the success you've had since that, because it's been amazing. You are a tremendously talented person. You are super hardworking, once again, super authentic, and it's great.
I need to cut you off because Cody, dude. Okay, this is like it's gonna be a little embarrassing here. Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead and embarrass me. It's fine.
So, um, I was following you on social media. You know how you pick people up and you're like, "Oh, that guy shows up in my algorithm," and I'm like, "That he's got really great hair. Look at that hair," right? I don't know if did you have long COVID hair or whatever, but, you posted some utterly fabulous, open, raw, real, deep, meaningful, heartfelt posts at a time where, seriously, it's the authenticity is lacking in our world. And I was immediately drawn to you because of your spirit, your ability to share your thoughts and feelings with people to in a way to help others. And I know that part of that truth also helps you, helps me. And I think I started like pinging you or commenting or whatever. But no, I mean, and none of us should be embarrassed by this stuff because
No,
it's genuine.
it is. And I gotta, if we're gonna talk about authenticity and just a fabulous set experience, that's the only way I can describe what happened with Broken Petals. Because between you and Wallace and our entire crew
Team. Yeah.
and everything, it was a team. I've shared this story before, but you were there firsthand. I mean, we got through 16 pages in like 6 to 7 hours. If we take out the hour prep we did at the beginning of the day and our hour-long lunch, we got everything done that we needed in 5, and everybody was able to go home and just they were able to go home.
So,
And that's
well-oiled machine, number 1. You guys had worked together before. That,
well, here's
that what?
here I'm gonna blow your mind here. It's like, yes,
You
Zach and
were
I
working
had
with Zach?
we worked together once before, like a year and a half. Or well, actually, no. It was pre-COVID that we worked together because we went to college together first off, and Zach had a little film proof of concept that he wanted to do that we just worked together on at his apartment. But other than that,
COVID. Yeah, during COVID.
yeah, during COVID, that was really the only time that we had worked together, at least in the capacity like we did with Broken Petals. But everybody else on who we had with us, Henry, Gabe, Ronnie, if we're going to talk about just amazing sound people, I think Ronnie Clement might just be an underrated gem that more people should know about. But the fact is, I had worked with all of those people at least once before, and I appreciate. I know I can't put into words how grateful I am for you, for Wallace, for everybody we had on that set. Because it's like you said, it was a well-oiled machine, and the one thing that it taught me, the biggest lesson it taught me, is that independent sets where they don't have blockbuster level
Budget.
of equipment and lighting and like 3 gaffer trucks pulling up to set to unload their equipment. Independent sets without that much stuff shouldn't take 12-hour days minimum to get stuff done. That's the big thing that it taught me, especially if everybody is prepared. And that's the other thing. Everybody who came to set, you, Wallace, everybody was prepared.
Game on. Game on. We were race ready. And let's go back to the universe blessing us with a absolutely stunning day because you had to jump in that lake. Spoiler alert!
Yeah.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah. Also, before we jump into the lake, just all the universal blessings to Jerry for letting us use his property and his house and his cat, like all of his property for free. I mean, this guy, goat is just a word, and then there's what Jerry is. Because Jerry was our location supervisor, and he's been so supportive of the art since he was young. Like, he's been involved with it, and he was the first person who answered the location call. He's like, "Hey, come check out my place."
Wait a minute.
And
Wait. You didn't know him before this?
no.
Oh,
Like, I sent out a location call on Facebook, and Jerry's like, "Why don't you come down and check out my cabin?" Which, I mean, right off rip, it's a message on Facebook. So any normal person would be like, maybe I should be a little skeptical here. But for me, us
the
being in the art,
PD was on point, 100% for production design. Just move in race ready.
Yeah, we didn't really have to do anything.
I know.
Everything was perfect.
Yeah,
And as Liz
unbelievable.
stated, the weather on that particular it was like 65, 70 degrees outside, and thank goodness, because there is a scene where I basically strip down to my underwear and jump into a lake. And so
Not basically, that's what you did.
that is what I did. The funny thing is though, is that the temperature of the water, it was lukewarm,
Yeah. It
which
was
I was
the end of the summer.
it's like I was expecting it to be colder. But with all that in mind, turning it back to you, the one thing I have been blessed to work with some really phenomenal people in my time, and you are one of those people. And the thing that I took away from that set is what it means to be a team leader, not just in terms of crew, but how to act in your role and in your responsibility as a talent on set. And something like that from you, for me, is invaluable, because taking what I learned from you and what I learned from Wallace, I have found has been the most beneficial thing with the things I've done moving forward, where I just showing up prepared on time, having conversation with people, and just knowing a little bit about everything so you can have a conversation with whoever it is, on crew or otherwise.
Exactly. I think it's the actor's responsibility to ensure a really great product. And if that means politely speaking up when you notice a continuity issue, especially on smaller independent sets. Nobody wants to show up in the editing room and go, "Why didn't somebody tell me there was a water bottle on the mantle?" A Downton Abbey peep, right? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, or a Starbucks coffee cup on the Game of Thrones table.
right. So again, I think we all know that people are typically uber focused in their job, but with so many sets of eyes, there's a right way to go about gently suggesting something that might improve the situation. And I truly believe I am compelled to speak up. And I will say, I also take great direction. If you want me to not comment, I will. But you preface it like that. And I think it's appreciated because again, when you're director and starring in it, you can only do so much at once. It's a whatever your focus is your main focus, but things slip up and we all want a great product. And you got that great product. It was a beautiful, beautiful film. Very meaningful to me, as you know. I
Yeah.
I was I was moved by your script when I had the opportunity to audition for it. And I love the time that you took with me to talk about all things related to it because it all matters to the characters, those interpersonal relationships. And that's really what being on a film set is about. Relationships with people, knowing that you can be depended upon and that you're a living, breathing, thinking entity. And we're all in the boat, pulling on the oars in the same direction, just as hard as the next guy to get to the finish line.
Yeah, we're all here to make stories. Everybody's got a role and everybody's got a job to do. I will say, just I'm glad you brought up the fact that, about continuity and the editing room, and I know my friend my friend Sarah Massey is going to appreciate that immensely. Sarah Massey, friend of mine, and who was also on the podcast. She's an actor, a DP, and she's an editor. And so the one thing that she does when she acts is focus on continuity. And specifically for her, it's hair positioning, specifically on women, because we have two shoulders. But her and I, one thing that we talked about a lot is just she gave a presentation on editing, like a little mini masterclass. Because I'll be honest, she's probably the best editor I have seen in a while. And the one thing
What her name is.
But the one thing that we've talked about specifically is just educating actors on the importance of, if they don't know anything else, educating them on continuity on film sets, and
Oh,
making sure that even if the delivery or the performance is slightly different on each take to make it organic, which is what we as actors strive for, in terms of where your hair is, in terms of what your movements are, and everything else, it's gotta be consistent. And this is where the technical side of doing the job that we do comes in, is because the more an actor who understands continuity and keeping that on set will be an editor's best friend, because at the end of the day, the directors and the director and producers and actors, all of us, we're really just fodder in the editor's hands, because without the editors, we don't have anything.
it is how to not show up on the cutting room floor. Because if your hair, like if I'm here in one take and then I'm here in this take, well, that if 90% of the film is here, whenever it's over here, you're only going to hear my voice because they can't use the visual.
Yeah,
100%. So
exactly. And that's it's not just sort of an editing thing, just in terms of, once again, circling to what you said about the purpose of being on film sets, which is above and beyond the craft and telling stories. It's about just fostering and nurturing and building relationships. That's what we're all here for. That's what this industry is based upon.
I need to interject though.
Yeah, go for it.
People know that that's like the secret to just being successful. But you gotta mean it. You have to be genuine.
That's
I
true.
think is people can smell a mile away who's kissing butt just because you've done 10 independent films in a year or whatever, and you're the director or writer, whatever. It's gotta happen organically and sincerely. That's it.
Yeah. And for me, that's sort of a it's not necessarily for everybody, but that I guess it's for that reason, but also I'm just an innately very curious person, being an actor and somebody who's done a lot of crew work, that the people I tend to gravitate towards the most is two. It's the hair and makeup people, which, let's face it, they're the people we spend the most time with. And number two is whoever the director of photography and the camera operators are. Because I am a bit of a, when it comes to camera gear, I'm a bit of a nerd. I love learning about that stuff. And so for me, those are the people I tend to want to talk to first, besides like the actors and the director and everybody else. And just having basic knowledge of those things for me, it doesn't even feel like networking in the traditional sense anymore. More as just the beginning of having a really cool conversation. And that's also why I loved talking with you and Wallace on the set of Broken Petals. And the thing I love about professional actors in particular, who know what their job is and who come to set, we all know that we're there to work. And the great thing about a film set is, when you're on it, when you're not setting up shots and doing your job, you find that film sets are like every other job, where actors and people, most of the time, we talk about basically everything other than like acting and being on film sets. We're talking about sports, or what's going on in our personal lives, or our favorite kind of music, or maybe a vacation we've got coming up. Like, and that's the thing that I wish more people on the outside world could see, because I think the idea of acting and filmmaking, all of this being this sort of otherworldly, untouchable, godly job, I have a feeling that would start to go away if people could hear the conversations we have behind the scenes.
Before action.
Before and speaking of action, there's one big thing we need to get into with you, Liz Bishop, as much as you can talk about, because I don't think I shared this with you, but The Holdovers was my favorite film of last year. Like, I saw it 4 times in theaters, and then once it was released to home video, I saw it twice
You
more,
you know,
and
let me
I
just say,
love it.
I'm gonna say why I think you love it. You you're a storyteller, you create stories, and you knew it was a really awesome story. The script was so thorough in their in the 3 leads' singular and collective journeys, and real people, slice of life, quirky problems to overcome, and they all intertwined, and
Yeah.
I have to say, A Little Night Music, Stephen Sondheim. Are you familiar?
Yes.
Okay. For
Ah!
people for people who don't know, you gotta go see it, but I'm well advanced in years, as we say, and I do have to say, the first time I saw A Little Night Music, um, I was in my 20s, and the story meant one thing to me. I saw it again when I was in my 40s. It meant another thing to me, and I recently saw it in my other years, and, it means something yet again, and The Holdovers is that type of story. I think there's something that you if you come back to this film as a holiday classic now, and Alexander Payne will roll over in his grave because he doesn't want it to be known as a Christmas movie, but,
No, he
but
doesn't.
it is, and if I'm obsessed with the soundtrack on Spotify, Mark Orton did the, original music for that, and it's music and soundtrack of my Christmases of the '60s and '70s when I was growing up, but I think what is so gosh darn awesome about David Hemingson's script, and I've had some direct message conversations with him on the socials, just about this, and I'm obsessed with the film, and for anyone who's listening, if you have not seen this film, it is 2 hours and 20 minutes long. Plan a bathroom break, but watch it, and if you if you don't catch on to it now, come back to it in 5 years. It's gonna mean something different to you as your life evolves.
Yeah, it's just there are so many realms that my brain connected to it. First of all, I'm gonna say anybody who grew up in New England will probably connect to it in some way, because in its sense of humor, in the acting, and in every aspect, it's not only a slice of life, it's a slice of New England. Like, and I loved it, especially since for me, I grew up in a household where my parents are older. My dad's in his 70s, my mother is gonna be 70 this year, and so the classics, the older films from like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, I grew up on that stuff. And The Holdovers, there's so many things that as a kid I probably wouldn't appreciate, but as somebody who has been making his own stuff and somebody who's 27 and has a different sort of respect for it now, I love the intro of the film and how it structured itself to be something from the 60s and 70s in the look, in everything. And it's just, I also have not laughed in a movie theater as hard as I
I
did.
I can't imagine you not laughing out loud because you are unfettered in your joy when it strikes you. So I'm sure that you've had other opportunities in theaters, but the laughs are certainly there as well as I've seen it 3 times, and the 3rd time that I saw it, I am still, my eyes are still leaking. There are
Yeah.
points that just are so touching. I have to say, to pull back the curtain here a little bit, about the process of landing my 7-word, role.
I was gonna
Um
turn into that. Yeah,
Yeah. So
let's dive right in. What was it like?
so so this is, it's interesting to note that I think like everything, when you are in this field and you submit to projects and maybe you don't get an audition, or you get an audition opportunity and you send that in and you don't get a call back, or you get a call back and then you don't book. It's selection, not rejection. There's million different ways to funnel down to who gets selected. And it has oftentimes probably nothing whatsoever to do in the way you say the lines. It's a look, it's a feel, it's an attitude. When it gets to the callbacks, and you're having a conversation, it's maybe the way that the conversation goes or how you carry yourself in the conversation. And I will go to my grave knowing that I more than likely booked that role, not because of my ability to say those few words, but the conversation that we had after the uh, callback scene that I ran. Alexander gave me a little bit of direction for change. I took that direction. I probably nailed it. And then we talked for 15 minutes. Look, how much can you change? 7 words, whatever. But the point is that I go into projects just open to whatever happens. The just the opportunity is the blessing. The ability to just be able to take in a breath and then have words come out. Nothing is guaranteed in this world to us, not the next second. And to be joyous and happy for what you have when you have it is what matters most. And I think if I was paired up with someone that looked like my twin, but maybe had a better attitude that day than me, they would have gotten booked. I don't, we'll never know, but a fascinating experience. And I will say, for people who probably have already heard this, Alexander Payne is one of the most. Okay, let's back up. When you work with a lot of directors, Hollywood is full of like, oh, he's great, or I love him, and amazing is like the buzzword that everybody uses. But when it came to Alexander Payne, everyone who encountered him felt by him, was made to feel by him like you were the only person in the room or the only person he was talking to. That focused, that direct, that connected. He knew everybody's name from the PA that checks people in and out. It's amazing. So everyone feels that not only is he in Boston Mind's book a great director, but just a real great human person, period.
That's
Yeah. I
I
mean,
I'm
lovely,
speechless.
lovely. There's stories I can't share with you. I'll go offline with them, but and I will because because he is just look, he's from Nebraska. He gets it. He's that guy. It's hard to know. New Englanders, I think, tend to be very closed off and direct if they even give you the time of day. And I think Midwesterners, of which I am one, tend to get a bad rap for being like, well, they cannot be that friendly. They cannot be that genuine or happy. What do they want from me? That's what I get. I've been at here now 38 years, whatever, but no, it can happen. It does happen.
Yeah, and that's I once again, things that I'm sort of bringing up, uh, that you brought up first, and I'm glad that you did, is the more time that I've been on film sets, and I don't know if your experience is the same, but a lot of times everybody has a horror story about one or a couple of sets they've been on, but that's not the norm. Most of the time, all of us are coming together because we genuinely are trying to do good work and make a good story. And we try to actually build connections with people. That's what most of the time it is. And for anybody who's listening, I know for me, hearing about that, like about somebody like Alexander Payne, that just that gives me hope, because that's the sort of thing that I strive for to be as an actor and a director. And once again, learning about that from people like Alexander Payne, and of course working with you and working with the myriad of people that I've had the pleasure to work with, all of you, for me, are the best kinds of example of the person I want to keep being and keep growing into. Because the last thing I want to do is walk onto a film set and not make somebody feel welcome when they come there.
Yeah. Or included, valued. Yeah, I mean, from just anybody who wants to avail themselves to be literally in the background. So important to paint those real pictures with real people. And our industry, we're scared of AI because we can be replaced in the background because most of the time, you're blurry and in the dark. And that's nerve-wracking because I loved every long, grueling hour I ever put into professional background work in the Boston area. And it to me, I I have a yes and improv attitude toward life. When I started down this path, I got a backstage, I filled it out, and I started, throwing spaghetti to the wall. And if anybody wanted me, I said, yes, when, where, why, when, let's go. And did it, whether it paid me or not. I am older and I am in the position to not have to, scrounge for every dollar. So there's that great blessing to have in my corner. Not everybody has that. However, the phrase is you got to spend money to make money. Every actor needs headshots. It's always better to, if you make a little money, throw it into a new headshot if you need that. If you make a little more money, buy a better light for your studio setup. But say yes, do it, and get out there and do that. I know a lot of people want instant gratification, whether it's money, fame, recognition. That's kind of the wrong reason to want to pursue this. Having fun, stimulating your brain in a way that you've not been stretched or stimulated before. Saying yes to those opportunities always lead to the next opportunity, always. And you don't know. Case in point, I I did what was I gonna I booked a shoot at Anthony Grissetti's studio up in Beverly, a high fashion shoot. And then lo and behold, I was uh, contacted by a reporter at the Boston Globe, and they wanted to do a story about what people do, late in life when they have an empty nest type of thing. And so they interviewed me, and then they said, "Oh, we'd like to get some pictures of you." I'm like, "Well, I'm doing this thing. I'll see if you can come along." And so the photographer came along, and then pictures ensued, whatever. And then when the story came out, I literally thought that I would be one of like 3 or 4 people showcased in this article about what to do when your nest empties. Well, it turns out it was just me. So that was a shocker. But then I get a phone call from a series that's being filmed in Los Angeles. Right? I mean, this is the say yes, and the doors open up when you say yes. So I get this telephone call from this producer for the series that used to live in Boston and still gets the Boston Globe and saw my little article and the crazy pictures, whatever. And I think it must have mentioned that I lived in Europe, blah, blah, blah. Do you speak German? Or they looked my IMDb up or whatever, or my Actors Access. And I'm like, yes, I speak German. Like, we'd love you to read for these sides, for these two ladies. And I auditioned for 2. I thought for sure I got the one, but I booked the other one. And next thing I know, I'm in Los Angeles I'm a 1940s Hausfrau Nazi sympathizer doing my German in a bunker right at the end, the liberation, uh, World War II. And the series is yet to find its distribution. But again, you just never know. People don't answer the phone anymore. I'm old, right? So when the phone rings, I still answer it. So that, that's what happens when you actually answer your Yeah.
It's
So
it,
it's called Middlehood, and I play Frida.
well, I know I'm going to be looking out for that. That's incredible. And I think it's an important point to put out there. The fact that number one, getting into this industry for the right reasons and staying in here for those reasons is the surest way you're going to find success eventually. And
Whatever you
one,
call success.
yeah, exactly. Not everybody's is gonna be the same. I have talked a number of times briefly about what my ideas for me personally of success are, but I don't expect anybody to have my ideas because my ideas are very, very like internationally based goals. But in terms of if your goal is to just get into this industry to where you can make a living wage at some point, I mean, that's a goal. If your goal is to just strictly do professional background work, that is a goal. It's like, and it is the beautiful thing about us being so connected as we are right now. Unfortunately for me, it's also one of the big reasons why I wish we were sort of back in the
In
60s,
the room.
70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
Because as much as I enjoy the accessibility the internet gives everybody, the one thing that I will say